Welcome back to Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. Today's guest is longtime Florida Southern golf coach Doug Gordin. Doug, a six-time national champion at the Division II level, is also a GCAA Hall of Fame member and one of the great coaches in the history of college golf. We talk about a lot today. It's great to get his perspective on college golf at the D2 level, but he also coached at the D1 level and he played at the D3 level. So Doug has a lot of experience in college golf. So thank you for listening today. I think you'll really enjoy this interview with Doug. All right, Better Than I Found It listeners, let's give a big welcome to Doug Gordin, longtime golf coach at Florida Southern. Before that, Georgia Southern, at Campbell. He's been a little bit of everywhere, but he spent a lot of years, 23 of them, at Florida Southern, won 6 national championships. I got to tell you, Doug, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure I've never really interviewed a 6-time national champion, so this is going to be fun for me.
Well, I'm glad that we're able to do this. I'm looking forward to it.
You know, Lee White was the one that talked to me, called me up one day and said, Coach, if you're looking for any sort of, podcast interviews for the future or whatever, I think you'd really like to Coach Gordin. I think he'd be an interesting interview. And I don't know, he has a lot of respect for you. And I know he's loving being where he is right now, obviously at Florida Southern, but he did tell me all about you.
Well, he played for me for 5 years, and he was one of these guys that you love to coach because he never had anything given to him. He was a preferred walk-on and earned everything he got. By the time he was a senior, he was the captain of the team and the number one player. I mean, that's what you dream of, right?
Well, and I was telling when I wrote this book, Better Than I Found It, so many years ago, about 5 years ago now, I was going to include a chapter called The Magic of a Walk-On. And my assistant coach at the time, Ryan Black, said, Coach, there's not that many walk-ons who end up making it. I mean, it's very rare. And I said, I think there are more than you think. I just think there are some. And Buddy Alexander told me the most amazing story about a guy named John Pettit who came in, missed the walk-on qualifying one year, finally made it, finally played, ended up being a team captain that won the national championship in 1993 for the University of Florida. So that's cool to hear that Lee was a walk-on and ended up being your team captain and really did a great job there. It is, I guess, rare, but it's really cool when a walk-on can do something special.
It is.
Yeah, it's great. Well, hey, I got to tell you, I know all about your success as a coach. It's very well documented, and you've won at a ridiculous level. Amazing job as a coach. But one of the things I didn't really know, and I wanted to kind of learn off the start here was, how you got into the game. And I assume it was a big influence was your dad because he was also a coach. But talk about kind of how you got to the game of golf.
Well, as you said, my dad was a coach and coached for 39 years and at a Division III school, Ohio Wesleyan, and, was a Hall of Famer himself, had a great career. And so I played all the sports, when I was little, but he took me out to the golf course, I think when I was 4 or 5, and gave me a little club, and, it just went from there. And I played a lot of junior golf. I started playing junior tournaments when I was 9 years old, if you can believe that. And we would spend the whole summer going around from tournament to tournament. And I like to say tongue in cheek that I was a child prodigy. But I did win a lot of tournaments from 9 to about 13. And then, as I say, not tongue in cheek, my game leveled off and I never got any better.
Well, you have something in common with Tiger Woods. He won a lot of tournaments between 9 and 13.
He did win, but he kept winning.
You stopped. Was that a choice you made, I think?
Well, I still continued to play, but I wasn't at the top like I was when I was 9 to 13, but I still was competitive and I guess my greatest claim to fame, or I say it is as a player, when I was a senior in high school, we were members, original members at Muirfield Village Golf Club when it opened in Dublin in 1974. And the very first tournament they held there was the Junior Club Championship, and I won it.
You won the very first tournament at Jack Nicklaus's golf course.
I did, and I mentioned that to Jack the last time I was with him, and he said, "I kind of remember that, but I'm not sure I believe it." So I sent him a clip. I sent him a clipping of me holding the trophy. He was
Wow.
there too. He
You
was
know,
there
I'm
because both his sons were playing in the tournament as well. So
Yeah, I'm a golf historian. I did not know that bit of trivia, but now I do, and I'm going to ask that question in a golf trivia contest when me and my other golf nerds get
who won
around
the first tournament ever at Muirfield Village Golf?
Murphy Village. They're going to say Jack Nicklaus or somebody, Johnny Miller, somebody from the mid 70s, but it was you. Congratulations. Well, I'm going to say this. I don't know this part of golf trivia, but I bet there's very few father-son combinations in the Golf Coaches Association of America Hall of Fame. I mean, you're a Hall of Famer. You went in 2001. Your dad went in the original 1980 class. A good friend of mine, Labron Harris from Oklahoma
Yep,
State, he was in
great
that very
coach.
first class.
Yep.
So I don't know. That's got to be a pretty rare commodity. I
I,
mean,
I don't think there is one. If there is another father son, I don't know it. Now, one that could happen is Bob Nye and his son Greg. I know Greg is on the ballot this year to go into the Hall of Fame, so they might be the second ones.
okay, well, I'm going to ask Greg Grost at the GCAA to do a little research because I've got to believe that's pretty rare. If nothing else, that's an amazing accomplishment. But so your dad was a big influence on your game, and you went and played for him. That had to be a special experience. I was just talking with Buddy Alexander a few days ago, and his son Tyson played for him for 4 years. And Tyson just, I think, had a great finish on the PGA Tour this
He
week. I
did.
mean,
He did.
he's been fighting so hard to keep at the game of golf for, gosh, 10 years now, 12 years. But he got to play for his dad, Buddy. And so, what was it like playing for your dad?
Well, it was looking back on it, it was a great experience. At the time, it was difficult on both of us, I think, because of course, the father, the coach, doesn't want to be accused of favoritism. And actually, my older brother, was on the team at the same time. He was a senior and I was a freshman, and my dad was the coach. So
Oh, wow.
he had double trouble. But he said, you can help me with that by leaving no doubt that you should be in the lineup. And I said, yeah, that's my goal. But he was very fair, and I played when I should have played, and I didn't play when I shouldn't have. So, but it was a great experience to spend 4 years being coached by him.
That's great. What is your dad still alive by any chance?
No, he passed away in 2018.
Okay, 2018. That was your last year as coaching
It
actually.
was, it was, and the last thing he said to me was we were in the middle of the spring season, the end of March, and we were ranked number one. In fact, that's probably the best team I ever coached was my last year. And the last thing he said to me was, "Well, go get another national championship and don't let those guys choke it."
You know, my guess is that your players knew that spring it was your last semester,
Oh
last
yeah, they did. They
well,
did.
there probably was a little self-imposed pressure by every one of them to try to send you out a winner.
Yeah, it was tough. Sometimes, as you know, being in the match play portion now, in that match medal play, you can be a great team, and you're a little off. As Tiger Woods calls match play, it's a boat race, and we got beat by a great team, a team that probably should have won it, but it was just one of those things. We won the stroke play and got beat in the second round of match play.
One of my, oh, I don't know, causes that I've had since before we went to match play. So this is back in 07, 08. was that I thought all of our matches should be medal match, just
Yeah.
like Division Two is doing it now. And I think you all went to the match play format much after us, after
Yes.
Division One, but you went in straight at medal match. And I had been preaching that because if nothing else, you don't have to change the format or the type of golf you're playing. And number two, every match gets to number 18. It's
Right.
like if I've got a 3-shot lead with 2 holes to play on 17 and 18 at Karsten Creek in Stillwater, Oklahoma, that's not safe. That's not a
No.
safe lead at all. So, but I've always thought that that would be better. And the team that's truly playing the best, and you did that week, you won the stroke play, would probably feel like they had somewhat of an advantage. And I think that the matches have every possibility of being just as exciting as match play. I mean, every bit as
Oh, yeah.
exciting.
There's no question. I mean, it's a very exciting format, and as you said, every match goes to the 18th hole, and then if the tiebreaker is even exciting. So, yeah, I think you know I never played match medal play myself. Of course, I played match play and stroke play, and match play is the same type of deal. You come across somebody who's makes six birdies in a row, and all of a sudden the match is over, and over 18 holes, you've always got a fighting chance. So it all can come down to that last hole, even if you're 3 or 4 strokes down.
Well, I still am fine with the format we have because it's the only format we have. And if my
Yeah,
guys, we got beaten match play a few years back by the University of Oklahoma, and they won the national championship. So they were obviously one of the best teams, period. But I don't know. I would like for the NCAA to consider medal match for Division One as well. We'll see if that ever happens. They haven't
yeah,
listened so far, but at
yeah.
least Division Two is doing it, so that we know it can be done.
Yes.
Uh, so you coached at Georgia Southern. Talk to me about that experience because that was a while ago. That was in the late '80s, correct? Early
Yeah,
'90s.
I went there in the fall of 1981,
Mhm.
and I was very fortunate in that Buddy Alexander had been the coach previous to me, and he left to try to play professional golf, and he left me an awfully good player, Jody Mudd,
Oh yeah.
and
Wow.
so I inherited the number one amateur in the country my first year at Georgia Southern, and that was a lot of fun. The problem was he finished 20th in the Masters as an amateur that year and turned pro the next day. And so he didn't finish the season. So it didn't really help our team. But that was a great experience. And my experience at Georgia Southern was really good. I was able to, it was a different type of recruiting there because we were a very small school back then, only had 7,000 students. And we're competing against, the SEC and the ACC, bigger schools. So you kind of had to be creative in recruiting, and Buddy was a master of that when he was there. We went after junior college players, try to get 2-year players coming in, and we try to sneak what we used to call one in the bushes, one that everybody was looking past, and occasionally we get one of those guys that were on their way up, and the big D1s weren't that interested in them yet, and then transfers as well. So that was kind of the way you had to recruit at Georgia Southern back then. Now, I mean, I think they can recruit with anybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think plus we have the transfer portal nowadays. We've got a lot of
Right.
different things that make recruiting a lot different than when you did it. But I can tell you that there are very few guys just hanging out in the bushes that have not learned that nobody's found out about. It
Well,
just,
yeah.
I mean, there's not very many surprises anymore.
Well, back then, it's as you know, you were coaching back then. We didn't have rankings and computers and everything else. We just kind of had to find it out on our own, and guys could hide in the bushes, and people wouldn't know about them.
Yeah,
That's not
that's the.
possible today.
It's not really possible today, but there are some kids who get a little bit under the radar, maybe under recruited. I also think there's kids that get over recruited,
Yeah,
and I think that's equally not such a great deal there because you end up getting kids that believe, or they get a little bit more entitled, if you will, if that happens. I mean, just does. So Georgia Southern, great experience. You also coached another PGA Tour player, Gene Sowers. You actually recruited him, is that correct?
I did. He was a great junior college player at what was then called ABAC. Uh, Great junior college coach Maxie Bowles, who's also in the Hall of Fame, I
Oh
think.
yeah. Hmm.
And I also was able to get his teammate there was a guy named Rusty Strawn, and I got both of them. And Rusty just won the USGA senior amateur, so he's really come into his own as a senior player.
Wow.
But Gene was a great player, and I was fortunate to get him. Georgia was after him as well. He's from Savannah, and so that was one that we were able to sneak away from Dick Kopus.
Dick was a good recruiter. How'd you do
Oh
that?
man,
That's a good job.
I
He
don't
was good.
know. I don't know. I didn't get many. I got two players from Dick Kopus in my time at Georgia Southern that he wanted to, and Gene was one of them, and another one was a guy named Richie Bryant, who was also a first team All American. So I snuck him away somehow. I don't
Good
know.
for you. Good for you. Well, that's part of your legend, I guess. So you were there 13 years, and then you went to work at Florida Southern. Tell me about that transition. Or no, you actually went to Campbell first.
Well, I was at Campbell first, and
Okay,
then I went to
before.
Georgia Southern. So I did go to Florida Southern from Georgia Southern. At the time, Mike, the transition wasn't that much because at that time, back in the middle '90s, Florida Southern was really a Division One school hiding in the classification of Division Two. They were playing a Division One schedule, not just a Division One schedule, a really good Division One schedule. Hosted their own tournament that was made up of all the good Division One teams, and so that's when Lee Jansen was playing. That's why he said, "What are you talking about?" He was playing at a Division One school. Florida Southern was one when he was there, and when I first started coaching. So the transition really wasn't different. It was pretty much the same thing I'd been doing it at Georgia Southern, but with the advantage in recruiting of weather and tradition. Being able to sell that 13-time national champion. That was pretty big. Well, at that time it was 7 national championships, but that was huge. And then a little later on, about 2001, I think the NCAA came in and made what I call the Florida Southern rule, because they said that you have to play at least 70% of your schedule against a D2 competition, or you couldn't play in the national championship. And to be quite frank, it was a tremendous advantage to Florida Southern. I mean, in recruiting and not just that, but in the mentality of the player. I mean, they're competing against Division One players all year, and so when we did play against Division Two, we played a couple of tournaments in regular season before we went to postseason. Their mentality was, well, these guys can't beat us. We're beating Division One players and Division One teams. So that was huge in terms of mentality too of the player.
Yeah, that rules change came on the cusp of a 3-year stretch where you won the national championship every year.
Yeah,
That's not a
and
coincidence.
I don't blame them. I mean, it was an unfair advantage, and but I took advantage of it for as long as I could.
Good for you. That's smart. It sounds like to me you understand a good situation when you see it and you work the deal as long as it's within the rules, you work it,
Hey,
right?
yeah, it's what I inherited, and Charlie Matlock had worked it for a long time. To his credit, he was the one that got in all those Division One tournaments, and you know, uh, I just tried to continue what he had started.
Well, and you had alluded to Lee Jansen a moment ago. When Lee was on this podcast a little over a year and a half ago, uh, he said, I really didn't understand it when people would say, "Why are you playing Division II golf?" He
Yeah.
said, "I was just playing college golf. I was going to school and studying and playing college golf." And truthfully, his was a little shrouded in the fact that they were playing a much better schedule than most
Oh yeah.
D2 teams would play.
Oh
Tougher
yeah.
anyway. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
So what's the biggest challenges for a D2 coach? You've been a D1 coach. you finished your last 23 years as a D2 coach. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges and why?
Well, certainly recruiting. A lot of D2 coaches go international because international players, as my friend Andrew Danis used to say, he was at Lynn. They don't
Hmm.
they don't care what division you are. They just want to come to Florida and play college golf. And so you're able to get a good program really quick if you can get some good international players, and most of them are pretty good. You just got to know who they are. I never went that route. I had a couple of international players, but I chose to try to recruit American players, and it was a challenge. Again, I had to, and it was back really for a long time before the rankings. I had to use my contacts and use my knowledge and try to find guys that some Division I schools were recruiting, but the thing that I had to sell to them that a lot of the Division Is that were recruiting them didn't was, well, you can come here and play for a national championship every year, and Division II national championship, Division I national championship doesn't make any difference. It's a national champion. You're on a national championship team, and that's going to make you think like a winner. So that was kind of my pitch when I was recruiting these Division I players, and I was able to get quite a few of them that were being recruited by Division I schools. And again, being in Florida helped. I didn't get many from that University of Florida and Florida State and schools like that were recruiting, but I got ones that were being recruited out of state by out of state teams.
How did you get Jeff Clouk? That's a pretty big
Boy,
win right there.
that's a good story. Jeff was one of these guys that was good, but he wasn't one of the top players, but he definitely was good, and he was being recruited by some Division I schools. Both his parents were University of Florida graduates. For some reason, University of Florida didn't recruit him that hard. I think I'm glad they didn't, because he would have gone there had they done it. But University of North Florida was recruiting him hard, and he was from right there in Jacksonville, where it is. And he told me that he was going to go there. He really liked Florida Southern, loved his visit, liked me, I guess, but he just had grown up around UNF golf, and he ran into Rocco Mediate, who was living up at TPC at the time, and so Rocco said to him, "Well, Jeff, where are you going to go?" And he goes, "Well, I love Florida Southern, but," he said, "I think I'm going to stay at home and go to UNF." And now this is Jeff telling the story. And Rocco just looked at him and he goes, "You want to be a professional golfer?" And Jeff goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you better go to a school that produces them. So you better go to Florida Southern." He changed his mind and went to Florida Southern. So Rocco helped me out on that one.
Yeah, Rocco and Lee Jansen, and they had quite a few golfers back in the '80s that were they ended up playing the tour and winning majors and winning tour events. And so essentially Florida Southern's been strong for 45, 50 years, 45 years
Oh, yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches up north would love to have the weather you guys have down there. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, I used to recruit against Jim Brown a lot at Ohio State just because I had so many contacts in Ohio, and he used to tell the guys that we were both recruiting, which he needed to. "Oh, you don't want to go down to Florida. You'll have to play every day, and you need that 2 month break. That'll make you a better player." I said, "Jim, it didn't work against me because I was able to say, well, I played up there in Ohio for 22 years, and you don't need that break. You need to get down here and play."
Well, it's funny because Jack Nicklaus has often said, he played basketball in the winter, just was
Yeah.
great. He needed the break. It was cold outside and snowy, and so he always made it sound like a good thing. But truly, I've seen enough snow in my life, and we've had it
I have to.
8.5 years at Baylor. I think we've had snow twice that was significant, and that was still too much for me. And, I just, anytime I see a snowstorm headed this way, I'm driving to Houston. If I can get to Houston, I don't think they're going to have snow there.
No,
So,
golfers don't like snow unless we're skiing.
yeah, and I don't even like that. So I'm just not a fan of being cold and just the cold part of it. I don't like it. So I should have been born a lot further south, but I wasn't. Um, so I know you still keep in touch and connect with Lee White. Tell me how how much do you have any sort of input with him, or does he call you for with questions or any of that?
Yeah, I made it a point when Lee took over just because I mean, I did the same thing, taking over for a guy that won 7 national championships. That's not an easy thing to do. And I wanted him to not be in my shadow as much as I could help that. So I told him, I'm going to stay away from the program. You're not going to see me. You're not going to hear from me unless you want to. And so I have never, approached him. Now he does from time to time reach out to me, on certain things he's going through, and I'm there to help him as much as I can. But to his credit, he's tried to stand on his own 2 feet and do this himself, and he's really working hard, and I think eventually he's going to get some breaks here and some recruiting breaks, and he's had a tough time a couple of times with he's identified some really good players and gotten them, and then those D1 swoop in, and as you said, it's tough. There's nobody you can hide anymore.
You
And
can't hide him anymore. But I'm glad to hear you did that for Lee. When I took over from Mike Holder
there you
at
go.
Oklahoma
You know
State,
what it's like.
yeah, he told me the day I got the job, he said, Mike, I'm going to be invisible for at least 2 years. You will not see me. And he
Yeah.
was in town, he was on campus. He was going to be at
Yeah.
Karsten Creek. He said, your players will not see me. This is your program. Laban Harris did that for me, and I'm going to do that for you. And he was true to his word, never saw him. Um, I asked him, we had a great team, and we were getting ready to head off to nationals. And I asked Mike if he would come and speak to the guys. I thought, he played in 3 of them. He coached in 32. There's there's got to be something he's going to say to these guys that would inspire them, and he did a great job. It was really, really well done, and he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes, I want you to come talk to him." And I think that was good thing on my part, because it was like, you know what, he can certainly give them something. But the thing I loved most about it was I didn't see him otherwise that first couple
Yeah.
of years. No, he wasn't there.
I think that's a good thing to do if you're going to be around, and because you're hit up all the time, as I'm sure Mike Holder was if he was in town there. Well, what do you think? How do you think he's doing? What, and you just got to kind of say, you know what, he's doing his thing, and you just got to stay out of it, and do your own thing.
Okay, well, very well done. I know Lee's going to do a great job there. He's a really, really good young coach. So, um, what did you do in qualifying through the years? And I mean, I know that every coach kind of evolves and changes, and qualifying changes based upon your team makeup and how large a team you have, how great a team, whatever. But did you ever do anything really creative that you'd like to share in qualifying?
We when you're in it long enough, you try about everything. And I remember one time, probably the most unique thing I did. I'm sure other coaches have done it. It was on a very cold day. I knew the conditions were going to be tough, and it was early in the year. It was in January, I think, and I didn't want the guys to go out there and qualifying that day and shoot 80 something, and just bust their egos coming right out of the gate. Uh, in the first qualifying of the year. So I didn't tell them, and we got out there, and I said, "Boys, we're not playing from the tips today. We're going to play from the post," which was about 6,400 yards, and normally the course played about 7,100. And I had the number one player in Division II that year, John Curley, and he shot 65. And the scores were pretty good, surprisingly, because they had to adjust on the fly. They'd never played from there, And that showed me something too, how quickly mentally they adjusted to a totally different golf course. But I remember Curly came over to me and I said, "What'd you shoot, John?" And he goes, 65. And he said it just like that, like he was mad. And I said, "Well, why are you mad about that?" He goes, "We shouldn't have been playing from there." And I said, "Did you enjoy shooting 65?" He goes, "Kind of." And I said, "Well, that's the point right there." But anyway, that's probably, I think one time, I just remembered it one time. I don't know if it was a qualifying round. Maybe it was. I played without pins in the green.
Mm-hmm.
You ever do that?
I've done that one time, and that's a good one. That's a really good one.
And a lot of them hit it close because they don't know where the pin is.
They can aim to the center of the green. That's one thing that doesn't change is the center of the green never changes.
Exactly.
Always
Exactly.
there. It's always there. So, a lot of coaches ask me, especially young coaches, what should I do in qualifying? This, that, the other thing. I said, you know, especially early in the season, don't be afraid to upset somebody or don't be afraid to knock them back on their heels. Don't be afraid to shock their system because the truth is, every single tournament you play in, something shocking and unusual and surprising happens anyway.
Oh yeah,
So
that's sure.
why wouldn't you try to prepare them a little bit for that?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I had never thought about this way, but my assistant, Mikkel, uh, he agrees with that, shock the system, whatever, but he says every final round of a qualifying, let's overspeed it, make it a lot easier, make it so they're going into the tournament with a great amount of confidence and feel like they shoot a low number. I had never thought about it like that. I just thought if I'm going to give them a hard time, it doesn't matter when it happens. But I feel like he's right. When we're getting ready to go to tournament, a bunch of 81s and 79s because I did something hard in qualifying, probably not a good plan.
Yeah. Well, you brought up Mike Holder. I know he was famous for calling a qualifying round in the worst weather day that he could find. And there's some merit to that. I think I don't think I'd do it all the time, but it shows to me. It showed me who's gonna grind it and who's gonna quit when the conditions get tough. And certainly, you want to know that as a coach.
Yeah, I think so. In fact, that reminds me of what Bear Bryant said. He said, I made practices harder than games because if they're going to quit, I want to find out in Tuscaloosa, not on the road when we're playing.
It's
So,
interesting. I don't want to divert, but since you brought up Bear Bryant,
well,
he was
we're
the
going to
athletic.
divert because I'm going to ask you, we both have something in common. We worked as an assistant in Alabama, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, he was the athletic director at Alabama and the football coach when I was there, my 2 years. In fact, I was there for his last national championship, which was kind of special. But as a young, graduate assistant coach, I used to go up to the Coliseum, which is where his office was, to get Coach Rehling's mail, and I'd do it at 6 o'clock in the morning because I knew Coach Bryant was going to be there, and he'd be the only person in the building. So I was hoping that he would see me and invite me into his office from time to time. Well, he did,
Oh, wow.
and and those were some conversations. You talk about an influence on me as a coach that I never forgot as a coach. And one of the things that he told me one time, uh, I asked him what he looked for in a recruit, in a player, and he said, "I don't want those guys that are what." I don't think he used the term blue chip, but the very best players. He goes, "I want those guys that are on their way up," and he put his hand going up this way. And I never forgot that. And I was never at a school really where I could recruit the number one junior player in the country. But he said to me that those guys that are the blue chip players or the number one high school players sometimes, in his view, aren't coachable. And he goes, "I want guys that I can coach that are coachable." And so I never forgot that in my recruiting. And I recruited a lot of guys that were on their way up, and they were coachable, very coachable. But the story I wanted to tell about Coach Bryant, since you brought it up in terms of making his practices tough, he also was one of these guys that, which Nick Saban's the same way, that isn't pleased with just winning. He wanted to win the game, but that wasn't his ultimate goal. He wanted you to play the very best that you could play. And if you didn't, he wasn't happy with you. And they played their home games back then up in Birmingham because the stadium in Tuscaloosa didn't hold enough people. So they were playing Southern Cal up there. This was when I was there. And, you got to go up I-59 to get to Birmingham and all the way back. So they beat Southern Cal at the last second. And Coach Bryant, they're heading back to the locker room, and he tells the assistant coaches, no showers, take them straight to the buses in their full gear. And the coaches are going, okay, this is going to get interesting right here. Coach Bryant wasn't pleased with the way they play, even though they won. So they get about 30 miles outside of Birmingham, going back to Tuscaloosa. And this will show you how much power Coach Bryant had in the state of Alabama, too. And the state troopers are escorting them back. And, of course, you got 2 lanes on one side, 2 lanes on the other, and a big median in the center. He stops the buses about 30 miles outside of Birmingham, and he tells everybody to get out, go get in the median, the grass median. And he conducted a practice for 45 minutes in the median of the interstate. So there you go, about expecting excellence.
Well,
and he taught me a lot about that too.
I love that. I mean, it's obviously you'd have a hard time getting away with something like that today. That's a different,
Yeah, I don't think
different
so.
world, different world we live in. But the expectation is, why are you worried about winning the game? Why don't you just worry about playing the best you can possibly play?
Right,
And
right.
you might do that and lose, but at least you
Exactly.
gave it everything you had, and you did your preparation. I think Bobby Knight was that way. Don't agree with everything Bobby Knight did as a coach, but it was also a different day and time. But he did demand excellence out of you, and the kids went to class and all of that. So I think there's a certain standard. When the standard is excellence and your best, not the best, but your best, I think you get a whole lot more out of it. So
Well, and as a coach, I always tried to do that. I expected excellence. The players knew what was expected of them, and as you said, sometimes you can play as good as you can possibly play, and I had teams do that, and we got beat, and I wasn't displeased. I mean, no, I was pleased with the team and told them that we got beat. There you go. On the other hand, we won tournaments that I was not happy with the performance, and a lot of my former players can tell you a few stories, Lee being one of them, about some of the things I did. Uh, I guess I will tell one on myself. This is one of the favorite ones they like to tell. I had a really good team in 1999. We won the national championship that year by 32 shots.
mm,
It
mm.
was stroke play. And we expected that's still when we were playing the D1 schedule. So we expected to win every D2 tournament that we played in. No question about it. So we went up to Valdosta Country Club for a regular season event, one of the ones we played in. And that's where the national championship was also being held that year. And we finished second. We didn't win the tournament. I forget who won, but we didn't win. So I didn't do exactly what Coach Bryant did, but kind of the same thing. So we're about, I don't know, 10 miles outside of Valdosta, heading back on I-75 to Lakeland. And Jeff Clouk actually was on that team, and he was sitting in the passenger seat beside me. And, they gave us a second place plaque or trophy. I don't remember what it was, something second place on it. And I turned over to Jeff. We're driving down the interstate, and I said, Jeff, roll your window down. He goes, why, Coach? He goes, it's not that hot in here or whatever. I said, just roll the window down. And so he rolled it down, and I picked up that second place plaque or whatever and threw it out the window. And I turned around into the team and I said, that's what we think about second place here.
Wow. So that was
We
probably
won the conference, the regional, and the national that year.
and won nationals by 32.
Yeah. So just basically making a statement about, this is what you guys are expected to do. You're capable of doing it. So let's do it. Now, the thing I felt bad about was probably the mower that hit that in the median was not real good. Plus, it had Valdosta State's name on it. So,
Well, I will say this, the statute of limitations has probably got you protected. It's been 23 years. You're probably okay on that one. Okay, now you mentioned Bear Bryant and something he taught you, which I thought was really good, by the way. Thank you for that story. But aside from Bear Bryant and perhaps your dad, what's the best thing you ever learned from another coach? Like guys you competed against or recruited against or coached against? Best
yeah,
thing.
that's a tough one because I was fortunate to be around a lot of great coaches and teachers in the game too. Uh, I guess I used a lot of Conrad Rehling stuff. The Hall of Fame coach from Alabama, who I worked for 2 years in my coaching, and one of the things that he used to say to me all the time, and I always tried to remember. He was interested certainly in winning, but he was also very interested, as interested, if not more interested, in the total development of the individual. And I tried to be that way as a coach too. And he used to tell me, Doug, you've got to remember. Uh, I'll try to clean this up because he was quite a colorful person.
Okay.
You've got to remember that you're working with 18-year-old, immature, and then he used a bad
Blankety blank.
word.
Yep.
Yeah. Uh, so, be tough on them, but give them a chance to mature and they'll win for you. And I never forgot that. So that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got as a coach. Because as coaches, sometimes we tend to get a little impatient, with the development of a player. And, you just, as long as they're putting the work in on the right things, not just putting the work in, but putting the work in on the right things for them. And, they're giving it their maximum effort. You just got to wait on them. You got to wait. And if you do, a lot of times those guys win for you and they develop.
They do. And it's very tempting when kids shoot an 80 or three putt the last three greens or whatever it is, and we don't win the tournament or something doesn't happen it's tempting to kind of get upset at them. And a young coach asked me, he says, how do you handle it when, a player really messes up and you lose a golf tournament? I said, well, I'm like anybody else. I'm a competitor. I want to win. I don't like losing. I don't like throwing it away, certainly. But the truth is, I'm culpable in this whole deal too. Part of this is on me. I evaluated this player initially. I recruited this player. I signed this player. I'm coaching this player, and I picked the team this week. It's
Yeah.
like, how can I not have some responsibility here at all? So when I think of it from that perspective, then I remember, okay, little Jimmy Smith or whoever it happens to be, he didn't mean to do that. And yeah, you're right. I got to wait on him sometimes to learn it a little slower than other guys learn it. But I can't get over a coach who thinks he has no culpability at all in this kid's 81 that he just shot. You're
Yeah.
partly responsible. So
Exactly. Exactly.
I didn't look at it like that as a young coach, though. I would get really upset when they didn't do what they were supposed to. And I'm still not happy with bad golf. I don't like bad golf. But like I like to tell people, I played enough bad golf to become a coach. So I played that much bad golf.
That's true. We know how to play bad golf and we can appreciate it.
We do. So tell me, how many former players have actually played the PGA Tour that you've coached? Whether it was at
Well,
Georgia
at,
Southern.
at, at Georgia Southern, I say Jody Mudd. I didn't really coach him. I inherited him his last year, but he did play the PGA Tour. And Gene Sowers, who I did recruit and coach at Georgia Southern. Uh, and then at Florida Southern, Jeff Clouk, who we just talked about, and Travis Perkins, who played the tour for a couple of years and then went into caddying, and he's caddied for, gosh, I don't know, 5 or 6 different players on the PGA Tour. And now he's with with Sam Burns and doing quite well with Sam Burns.
That's a good bag to be on
Sam's
right
won
now.
quite a few tournaments, and Travis got on his bag, so Travis must be doing something right. And then John Vanderlaan, who's currently on the Corn Ferry Tour. So that's it so far on Florida Southerns.
Yeah, still a wonderful run. Congratulations on that.
Yeah,
What do
that's some
you,
good play.
we've mentioned this, you've probably already answered this, but um, who would be your greatest coaching mentor and why? Let's leave your dad out of this. And we know he was a great mentor for you, obviously, as a coach, but any other mentors, guys that actually helped you out along the path, along your journey that made you a better coach?
Yeah, I would say Conrad Rehling at Alabama and Rod Myers at Duke, who actually played for my dad at Ohio Wesleyan, and Rod was a very close friend of mine, and gave me a lot of good advice on coaching. And then a person outside of coaching, but a great teacher, uh, Jim Flick and Bill Strasball Jr. and Bob Toski. All three of them gave me a lot of great advice on how to deal with young players, and both from a coaching standpoint and from a teaching standpoint.
Boy, that's some pretty heavy names. How did you run across those
Well,
guys?
my dad was, he was a pretty big person in golf, and he used to go. I don't know if you ever heard of an organization called the National Golf Foundation.
Oh yeah.
They used to run seminars in the summertime for coaches, and my dad was on the staff, and so they would bring in coaches like him, and then great teachers like Strasball and Flick and Toski, and I would go with my dad to all these as a young kid, and so I got to know them very well at these seminars and stuff. In fact, I'll tell you a quick Bob Toski story. In fact, I saw him at the Masters about 5 years ago, and I tried to remind him of this, and before I could get through the story, he completed it. He remembered it. But he came out to the Arnold Palmer Golf Academy in 1968 in Vail, Colorado, which my dad was teaching in, just to give a clinic. And he went to dinner. My dad invited him over to our condo to have dinner. So he came over and had dinner, and the Vail Golf Club was right beside the condo. So I'm 12 years old, and again, as I told you at the beginning, I'm in my child prodigy stage now. I'm winning all kinds of tournaments as a junior golfer, so I'm pretty cocky. And so we're sitting at dinner, and Toski's pretty cocky too, and he's talking about how great he hits a golf ball, which he did, and how great a putter he is, and this and that. And finally, I'd had enough of it as a 12-year-old, and I said, "Well, Mr. Toski, after dinner, you want to walk over to the putting green at Vail Golf Club, and we'll just have a match, and we'll see who wins." So anyway, make the story short, I beat him, and I never let him forget it, and he remembered it, 50 years later when I saw him at the Masters 5 years ago.
Yeah, he's
But
a
he
pretty
was
big
great.
name.
Toski was a great teacher, is a great teacher still, and a great coach as well. One of the originals.
I think that a lot of great teachers from way back then would have made really good college golf coaches.
Yeah,
I really believe that. And uh, one of the things that one of the reasons why is because I think they love teaching the game, but they also played the game. And if
right.
you played the game and taught the game, you might make a pretty good college golf coach, I would think.
I think so. I think you
Yeah,
would.
absolutely. What do you miss most about coaching?
Oh man, uh, what everybody says, and I agree with them. I miss the relationship with the 18 to 22-year-old guys and watching their development as golfers and as people. I really enjoyed that process, even though there's some hardship that goes along with it. So I miss that the most, and seeing the other coaches. Uh, you develop as you have. I know great friendships in the game, and you just don't see those guys anymore when you're not going to tournaments, and and you're not going to the coaches conventions and that kind of stuff. So that's and being around the college setting, I grew up around the college setting with my dad being a coach. And so I was on a college campus my whole life, and I miss being on a college campus as well.
Yeah, I would think that's something I'm going to miss a big time. Just being around people that make you feel younger. I mean, youthful for sure.
Exactly.
And just watching them kind of go through what you went through and how they navigate that whole process. I'm going to miss that. I know. I don't know when my day's coming, but it is coming. All right. I didn't ask you this. I meant to earlier. What was the most memorable moment of those 6 national championships that you won? It has to be something that stands out like I'll never forget that.
Well, they're all memorable, but one thing, goodness.
That's okay.
You know what sticks out in my mind, and it really shouldn't, are the close ones that we lost.
Okay.
And those were memorable. So I'll talk one about that. I'll never forget that as long as I live. Rob Oppenheimer, who's plays the PGA Tour, and there's another D2 player who's had quite a great career, played at Rollins. In 2001, or excuse me, 2002, we were still playing stroke play, and we came down to the last hole tied with Rollins and Cal State Stanislaus. And so it was between the two number one players. My guy was Steve Paramore, and Rollins' guy was Oppenheimer. And Rob hit it on there about 30 feet behind the hole on the 18th hole. And, there's huge crowds around the green. And my guy just missed the green to the left, and he hits first and almost chips it in, hits it about 3.5 feet past. So Rob's got this 30-footer to win the national championship, and he made it.
Mm.
I told him that was the greatest putt I'd ever seen under pressure in my lifetime, and I had seen a few of them. But that was exciting for them, not so exciting for us. But I would probably say my national championships, the first one was probably the most memorable, and that was played out in your old territory, out at Oak Tree in Oklahoma.
Oh yeah,
very difficult golf course, and that was special because we were behind going in the last day, and we came from behind, and I think won it by about 10. So that was probably my most memorable moment as a coach, but they all were memorable, all the championships.
I should have come and said hello to you. I was actually out there that day. I was still a high school golf coach. Yeah, one of my former players, Jeff White, was playing for Abilene Christian.
I remember Jeff.
And he was there, and Dax Johnston, who I'd taught when he was younger.
Yeah, boy, Dax was a really good player.
Wonderful player, yeah. Okay, good memory there. Well, okay, I'm going to ask, what would you change about collegiate athletics? This might be a little tough question, but what's one thing you would say, yep, I would change that?
Oh, there's no question. Unfortunately, I didn't have to deal with it. The portal. I'd never have a portal. I just think, as a coach, shoot, you're powerless, really, and I don't think any coach ever wants to feel that way. And it just amazes me that the guy doesn't even have to tell you he's transferring. You find it out by looking at the portal.
That's the part that bothers me. I mean, I'm not. I think everybody deserves a chance to be happy and have a good situation, and some situations aren't good, and so maybe a transfer is necessary. But it's conflict resolution. I mean, I don't agree with what the coach does, or he doesn't agree with me, or whatever. Let's work this out man to man.
Right.
And we're missing a big step for young men, 18 to 22. Right. Even if they do want to leave,
100%.
Yeah, but I'm not getting much any groundswell on that one either. I keep on preaching it. It's just like, that's a great opportunity to teach a young man, okay, I don't agree with what Coach McGraw is doing, so I should go talk to him. Maybe I'll bring my parents along, but either way, I'm gonna go talk to him and see if we can't work this out. If we can't, I'm gonna move on. but that way I have a chance to talk to him as well.
Be a man about it,
Yeah.
It's just like being an employee and not getting along with the boss. I mean, if you get a job after college, you're going to have to learn to deal with those situations. And as you said, it's a great learning opportunity to learn how to deal with it as a young person in college. And I don't know how you dealt with it as a coach before the portal, but when I had a guy that was thinking about transferring, that was always the way we handled it. And if we couldn't resolve it, I was the type of coach that I wanted what the player thought was best for him. And I never had a problem giving a player a release, as long as we'd gone through the process first and talked it through.
Well, and I think that's part of one of the things I take a little bit of pride in is I've only had 2 transfers out of my program of kids I recruited in my entire career. Just 2 kids that I recruited left. And now some other kids that I inherited when I got to a place maybe weren't right for whatever, but the idea is you want to fight for those relationships. You want to fight for them. And, and I'm partly responsible because if I got the wrong kid in here or I don't have a good environment for him or I maybe under-evaluated, he's not as good a player as I thought he once could be. But regardless, there needs to be man-to-man. We have a talk and we talk about it. I agree with you. I think if I could change one thing, at least about the portal would be that one thing.
Yeah, I can't believe that a majority of coaches like the portal, but apparently they must. I guess they like it when they get a player.
Well, again, I'm not against a kid wanting his best opportunity and to thrive and flourish in an environment. But anyway, we might do a better job if the portal didn't exist of evaluating in the recruiting process. I think we do a much better job.
Sure. That's for sure.
Well, listen, Doug, thank you so much for spending an hour with me today, just giving us some wisdom. As I said, I've never interviewed a 6-time national champion. So that was a lot of fun for me to get your perspectives on coaching, not just Division II golf, but just coaching golf. You've had an amazing career, and I'm now glad that my Better Than I Found It listeners know a little more about you.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I wish you and Baylor the greatest success, and hang in there and coach. Some of us old guys need to stay in it a little bit longer.
I'm going to hang in there as long as they'll have me. How about that?
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks again, Doug. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.